Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and produced by Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. When was the last time you had a close encounter with plastic? Yes, plastic. Believe it or not, the average American consumes a credit card of plastic a week. So writes Ed Humes in his new book, Total Garbage. He joins Russell and Alan to talk trash and trash solutions.
Morning, Alan. Morning, Lynn.
Good morning.
I just got back from the breakfast ride. Love it out there.
Well, tell us just a little snippet.
Well, you know, it's got the biggest view in Tucson, Panther and Safford Peaks, and we still cook everything in or on cast iron, the old style. It's something you'd recognize, of course, yes. Alan. And kind of a typical ranch breakfast out there, and the guests love being out and the food. So it never gets old.
And it was a beautiful morning today.
Yeah. This is my favorite. It isn't all everybody's favorite time of year, but I love April, May. It is my favorite. So, how about you, Alan? You guys, you did quite a bit of Dutch oven cooking and all that.
We had a month of Roundup, both spring and fall, so we had 60 days of Dutch oven cooking every year.
Wow.
And that was, you always look forward to that. If you have a good cook, Dutch oven is just better.
Yeah, and you talk about not much garbage, because we're going to talk garbage today.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have any garbage when, who was your cook, Bug Quinn?
Bug Quinn, yeah.
Yeah, he'd bring everything out, and you were telling me before that the Cowboys didn't like even beans in cans, so you didn't even have cans.
He would have lost his life if he had opened a can of beans. The Cowboys wanted real beans cooked, right there, and they called the canned beans, they called them sweet beans, and dulces, for the Spanish,
mm-hmm.
And they would have hit him with the can that he opened if he'd opened a can of those beans.
Well, and I think that story really, and it's going to lead into talking to Edward Humes about his book, but it talks about how in a relatively short time in human history, we've really changed a lot in terms of how much waste. So today, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Edward Humes, author of the new book, Total Garbage, How We Can Fix Our Waste and Heal Our World. His 16 previous books include Garbology, The Forever Witness, a true crime story about DNA, and the best-selling Mississippi Mud, another true crime story being developed into a series. Ed and his wife live in Santa Barbara. What a nice place to live. Growing up out east, he had no pets, but had made up for that with a home filled with critters, including rescued greyhounds. Ed volunteers with the dogs, with the Gray Save rescue group, and during the pandemic, his family fostered those 7 dogs off the racetrack. He and his wife recently moved to where he is, and I think he's headed to Maine. But anyway, welcome, Ed.
Oh, thanks so much. You left something out, though. For 5 years early in my writing career, I was a reporter for the late lamented Tucson Citizen, where once a year, like everyone else on the staff, we were all rodeo writers covering the annual Tucson Rodeo. So I'm really happy to be here to cowboy up like old times.
Well, it hadn't changed.
Well, I tell you, my dad didn't, in one small way, fortunately, live long enough to see the demise of the Citizen, because he really liked that paper and was not a fan of its competitor. So he would be really sad to have it gone.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, you've written a couple of books on garbage. What got you interested in garbage?
You mean aside from an abiding love for trash talk? You mean? Yeah. So it's pretty amazing, but waste is the biggest thing we make, and yet it's the hardest thing for us to see clearly, which is crazy because we literally live in the most wasteful civilization in history. And that goes way beyond just what we roll to the curb each week. So, this is my second book about waste, but the focus is really on things other than the trash can, although that's part of it too. I wanted to answer a central question. What if all our big environmental crises, from plastic pollution to climate change and everything in between, are actually symptoms of a single disease, and it's something we can actually fix and figure out? What would happen if we set our targets on that one arch villain, waste? That shift in thinking changes everything. It can save the planet.
So you, if I read your book correctly, actually got interested in this when you attended was it a conference given by Walmart or a lecture given by somebody who worked at Walmart?
No, it was a sustainability conference, which and this was some time ago, but it stuck with me all along. And I was actually working on an earlier book project about the partnership between a river guide, a guy who lived half of his life outdoors as well, who became one of the country's first sustainability consultants, and his first big client was Walmart. And they were working on what they were calling then the business case for sustainability, that it made sense for a business to be more sustainable. And the thing they kept zeroing in on was getting the waste out, and not just diverting things from landfill and recycling and composting, although that was part of it. It was also all the parts of their operation that actually had incredible amounts of wasted energy or wasted resources built into it. And that was their new corporate religion. We got to get the waste out, because they thought Walmart was this big, efficient operation. And this river guide said, yeah, but why are you doing this? Why are you shipping giant packages of detergent when you could do small bottles that are more concentrated and takes up less shelf space, less truck space, less water? You can save, X millions of dollars just by pressuring your vendors into making little bottles of detergent, because all you do are taking out is the water. And they went through their entire business finding things like that. And, it's still kind of not exactly a green company, but it's a lot less evil than it used to be because of this river guide's help. And waste was the key. And that really stuck with me.
Do you find it hard to get people to shift their focus onto that, to sustainability and recycling?
Actually, no, because it's the big tent. I mean, there's no yay waste political party out there. It's not divisive. Everybody realizes waste is a loss and a cost. What if I told you, and this is the truth, that unless you live in a very renewably powered community, which most of us don't, 2/3 of your utility bill pays for the waste in our systems rather than the stuff that's actually lighting your house?
Oh, boy.
Or that if you drive a gasoline-powered car, 4/5 of what you pay at the pump, $4 out of $5, is waste, because our cars are so terribly inefficient. And thinking about, well, how can we fix that without everybody having to lay down $50,000 for a Tesla that most of us can't afford? There are other ways to get around that wasteful part of our daily lives, and have a lot of benefits other than saving the planet go with it, like saving money, like having a more and higher quality of life.
But isn't an electric car also wasteful because of the, what is it called, resistance? As the electricity diminishes as it goes increasingly down lines?
No, that's a misnomer. Because so a car, by virtue of the way internal combustion works, only 20% of the energy consumed actually turns the wheels. Everything else goes up in heat and smoke. I mean, you know how hot cars get, right? You're literally, from a physicist's point of view, they're furnaces on wheels, and a little bit of that energy actually moves them. Cars use 90% of the electricity that goes in, turns the wheels.
But how about the resistance from the source to the user?
You mean in the grid?
Yeah, as the electricity travels from the source to the use. There's statistics on how much of it disappears. I don't know.
There's a loss, but The real problem with our power system again gets back to using fossil fuels, because even Edison said, "God, this has got to be a stopgap measure." And most of my fuel, and he was using coal, goes to waste, because that's just the nature of the beast.
Right.
About 2/3 of that energy dissipates as heat and inefficiency before the electricity is even generated. That's why hydropower and solar energy and wind are more efficient, not because they're capturing all the energy of the sun, but because only capturing some of it doesn't have a cost, as burning gas or burning coal and wasting most of it is a cost.
So how do we focus on saving more and using less of the energy that gets wasted?
Well, I visited this town I write about in the book called Peachtree City, Georgia. It's about 30 miles outside of Atlanta. It's got 40,000 residents, and they've evolved this sort of parallel transportation system that they just love. And it's a separate sort of road system that evolved organically. It wasn't in the original plan, but it was originally for hiking and biking. But now it's dominated by golf carts, mostly electric golf carts and e-bikes. And people they commute to work in these. It's a rite of passage when you turn 15 and a half. That you can drive your way to school. So the parking lot of the high school has thousands of golf carts, and they're all tricked out with school mascot, stuffed animals and banners and stuff. And I went there, and I was very skeptical, because golf carts are really kind of a crappy substitute for a car, right? Yeah. But I was driving around with the mayor, and she says, "I feel sorry for people who don't have this." And when you think about how we actually use our big cars, our expensive cars, 50% of our trips are 3 miles or less, and 93% of the time we get in a car, it's to go 25 miles or less. So they're perfectly happy doing most of their stuff in these little electric cars.
Well, you see that in some of these, in these little planned communities, it seems like they use them. But I want to circle back to something, because I totally agree. I love the concept of your book, and I love it because it's preaching to the choir. And I'm a million miles from what somebody would call an environmentalist, but I totally agree with the concept of waste should be universally. It's a big tent. I think you used the term. Nobody should disagree, but where I disagree with you is, I say this all the time. I say it specifically here. I talk about it in general with people, and their eyes glass over. And I say, we would make such headway as a culture, civilization, if we just took aim at waste. Period. Don't put too much on your plate. Just every single person, if they addressed it in their everyday behavior, we would, and in the bigger picture with the concentrated small bottles of detergent with Walmart, that's the corporate end. But every single individual that lives in this first world that we live in, you said we're the most wasteful civilization in history. It's sure not hard to believe. But people just go blank on me. They don't see it. They don't see it in their own behavior. And it makes me crazy.
You're right. I mean, that's actually I think it's sort of a line right out of the book, which is, we see it as normal if we see it at all, but it's not normal. It's kind of an aberration, because for instance, up until the 1960s, actually, the end of the 60s, we had basically zero plastic in our daily trash. So how did we go from that to being inundated with it? What happened and why? And we're easily influenced by marketing and by what everybody else is doing. But I think I'm seeing a reaction to when I'm going around talking about this from people from all walks, like all parts of the country, red state and blue, I didn't know that. I didn't know we were wasting that much. I didn't know I was throwing out 8.2 pounds of stuff every day, every man, woman, and child in America. That's crazy, because we're really good at hiding our waste from ourselves. But, like what's happening with gas stoves. I don't believe bans are effective, and there's been a lot of divisiveness over banning gas stoves. But when people learn that it matters for their kids' health, that they're running a 42% higher risk of their kid having childhood asthma or other respiratory problems by having a gas stove in the house.
Well, talk about
what
that.
What else can I do? And there's a lot of things you could do that don't cost a fortune to change that.
In your book, Ed, you have some stories about people who are really addressing waste and taking action to mitigate that waste. And one of them is a chef, and you're talking about gas stoves now. Tell us that story about Chef, is it Galarza?
Yes, Chris Galarza. Yeah, so it sounds like we're going all over the place here. But the reason for that is in every significant part of our lives, in our food and how we cook it and how we get around and the products we buy, how we heat and cool our homes, all of it is completely the most wasteful way possible. It seems like we're choosing the most wasteful way possible. And so back in the day, those were the best options we have, but they're not the best options. They're just what we're used to. And cooking, as Chris Galarza found out, is one of those things where we have a way better option now, and it's called induction cooking. And I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of it, but maybe they're not sure what it is. But he was motivated as a professional chef. One day the whole staff was like sweating bullets in the kitchen. This is a fine dining restaurant, but every kitchen in a restaurant is kind of a sweatshop. And everybody was getting sick and running outside to throw up, and he stuck a meat thermometer in his pocket. It was 130 degrees in that kitchen.
Oh my God!
And he said, I am just tired of that. I mean, that is potentially fatal temperatures if you're in it long enough, as we know from some of the heat waves that we've suffered through. And he started looking into alternatives, and no chef and very few home cooks want to have an old school electric stove with those orange coils that heat up. They're just god awful, and they're burn hazards and everything else. But he started finding out about induction cooking with magnetism. If you have a toy train set with a transformer or a wireless charger for your phone, that works through magnetism, and you notice it gets hot. Heat is an unintended byproduct. In the induction stove, the same principles at work, but it's the intended product, and it heats a metal pot that's magnetic steel or cast iron, as you used in your chuck wagon with Bug, and you can have an induction cooker on the trail, really, the battery operated one, and it projects that magnetic field into the bottom of the pan, and since it has nowhere to go, the heat inside builds up fast. In a phone charger, the energy goes into a battery, but in an induction stove, it just heats the pot, and it's very direct. It's very efficient. It boils water twice as fast as a gas stove can, and the stove itself doesn't get hot. A gas stove heats everything around it, the whole stove, the cooks, the air. You need special cooling systems to deal with it, and ventilation. You don't need any of that with an induction cooker.
Because you can touch that, right? And then
you can put your hand
service
on an active burner, because it's not a burner; it's a magnetic field. Unless you had a steel ring or something, then you.
So it wouldn't. So it would work with anything that's iron based, and so though aluminum is good at convection or conveying electricity, it wouldn't work, right? So you couldn't use
it
aluminum.
Wouldn't. It has to be magnetic, something the magnet will stick to. It could be aluminum if it's steel clad on the bottom.
Right,
it could be
right.
a copper pan with a steel. Professional chefs almost all cook on steel. I mean, they don't have ideas. So it's not a hard swap for them. Home cooks would have to, if they didn't have cast iron or stainless steel, they'd have to invest in some new pots. But you'd be saving on energy, and your home insurance goes down because kitchens are the number one starting place for home fires, but not with an induction stove in it. And you can get these little My cousin Darcy has been suffering. She lives in New York. She's been suffering with long COVID. She was one of the first people who read my book. I love my cousin. She's like, and she read that about. And she lives in an apartment in New York with a gas stove, like everybody in New York does. And she never knew that was a problem. She's had all these respiratory issues from long COVID, and she got online and said, "Oh, I found a countertop version for $64 at IKEA. What a deal!" And she brings it home and she starts cooking on it instead of her gas stove. She still uses the oven a little bit, but she opens the window up on the gas stove. And she says it's been night and day. I mean, I'm by no means healed or anything, but my coughing and my difficulty breathing has gone way down. Because, what could possibly go wrong with burning fossil fuels in the middle of an apartment with no ventilation? What could possibly go wrong with that?
Right.
And that's what we've all been doing. And if you think about it, that's crazy. Why are we doing that? You wouldn't put a barbecue in the middle of the house. And it's, but
some people I know.
Natural gas. We think natural right. We think natural gas must somehow be okay. That's just a marketing term. Volcanoes are natural too, but you want one of those in your house, and that's kind of what we're doing with our gas stoves. So here, you have a product that saves you money. You need less ventilation and less cooling in a restaurant, and it pays for itself because you can serve more customers more quickly. You don't have to preheat anything. Chris Galarza has this demo he does for skeptical chefs. He puts his frying pan, great big chef pan, into the freezer. And it brings it out all frosty, and he puts it on the stove and drops some oil in it. And by the time he gets his onions in it, it's already sizzling. And they're all cut up anyway, so It's like instantaneous.
Well, we have to stop on that because we have gone way over, and Lynn's poking me in the ribs here. So we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Thank you, cowboys and gentlemen. My name is Stan Husted, and I'm the leader, the creator of the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network, and it was my privilege and my pleasure about 5 years ago to go to Russell True, and I had been going to him for a number of years and said, "Russell, it's time for you to finally get on the radio and do a program about the cowboy and Western way of life that you love so much." And he says with a smile, "Well, I finally agreed to try one because then Stan would quit nagging me." Well, he did, and he's been doing it now for almost 5 years. And he and Alan have a reputation as some of the people who tell some of the best stories about the West, the traditions, and the good things that come from the way of life that we love. And I want to invite you to that same opportunity. The Cowboy Spirit Radio Network, part of What It Takes Radio, is designed especially to help those of you who, right now, you have a story to tell. You have some pictures to show, and you'll tell a story about them. You've got some wisdom, some insight and truth, and more importantly, you've got something worthwhile that you'd like to share with others. Well, this is the way to do it today. Podcast, personal on-demand radio is the way to tell your story and to get your message out into the world. So I look forward to the opportunity to help you do just that. Reach out to me at Stan, S-T-A-N, at witradio. That's witradio.net. And we'll get our stories together, and we'll see if we can, get you on the radio.
So, Ed, in your book, you have a really interesting section about a university in Minnesota, University of Minnesota Morris, right?
Yes.
And what they're doing. Give us, what are they doing?
Well, a lot. And campuses in general, including, two of Arizona's major universities, are really kind of hotbeds for pushing zero waste and other sustainability initiatives. And it's really kind of exciting. And what I found at the University of Morris and the farm town of Morris, where it's located, is a really unique partnership between the farmers and the university. And it started years ago with a composting program, and the farmers had always wanted to have a composting operation for their ag and food waste, and they never could get it going. All the experts said, "Oh, it's too cold there. You'll need all this expensive equipment. It's not worth it. Don't do it." And so they were discouraged. And then this bunch of students on their own, just as a student project, came up with a way to compost through year-round in frigid Minnesota for pennies. There was no expensive equipment needed, and they just kind of did it as a public service. And suddenly the farmers had all this cheap compost being produced. They had a place that they could take their waste and didn't have to pay for it. And ultimately, the students built this into a county-wide program and then donated it to the county. And to say that the farmers were pleased is an understatement. And it led to sort of informal discussion of, well, what else can we do? What else you got going on your campus that might be good for our community? And they worked on the next thing. This campus said, well, we're saving a bunch of money because we converted to LED lighting. And this was 10 years before anybody else got onto the fact that you could save a lot of money because it's so much more efficient. And they helped this city of Morris, a town of about 5,000 people, make that conversion. And it took $100,000 of electric bill out of their monthly budget. And for a town of 5,000, now they're eye-popping for them.
That's astounding.
And so what else can we do? And well, this campus has 2 giant wind turbines. They make 4 times the electricity that the campus needs, and they provide it into the local grid. So they have some of the cheapest electricity. Minnesota's a windy place, and they have very inexpensive electricity in the area thanks to the university. And they said, we want to do this experiment where we use wind power to make green fertilizer. So they turn hydrogen and into ammonia using wind power, and so and then they can create fertilizer with it. They're working on using it to make something called urea, which is much easier to handle than ammonia, and packs a big wallop of nitrogen for the soil, and it's completely carbon neutral. It's incredible, and it's cheap, and the farmers are proud of it. Look what we're doing here, because they're part of this, and so they embarked on their own city program to have to become energy independent. All the city buildings have solar energy on it. This has nothing to do with the university. Now they're doing this on their own. But the school buses are electric. The local buses are electric. Even the liquor store is solar powered, because in Minnesota the cities own the liquor stores. That's the way they roll in Minnesota, and their motto is
leave it to the Midwest.
We chill your beer with the sun. Okay, this is like totally red state, 13 points in favor of Trump farm country, and they are loving their renewable energy and their energy independence. And the conversation there isn't about climate change. It's about getting the waste out of the system, using it constructively, using the resources at hand, being energy independent, and building something for our kids. Those are universal values that anybody can embrace. And the sustainability guy at at the university. His name's Troy Goodnow. I pronounce it Goodnow, but it's spelled good enough, so I always think of that way. He said, because he talks about the environmental decisions that are good enough to really improve the world, and that's what they're all about there. He said, if we can do this in Morris, Minnesota, this can happen anywhere.
So is word spreading? Or do other farming communities
the
know?
Morris model. There's at least 5 other towns that are having similar partnerships and programs forming right now.
In Minnesota or elsewhere?
Yes,
or?
and they make but others are interested, and they'll give out all their information to anyone who wants it to help towards these kinds of partnerships. Now, every community is different, but there's no reason why there couldn't be something like this in Tucson or in Phoenix. And there's a lot of the cows love the shade on hot days, so these solar panels are elevated in the pastures. It's a big dairy farming part of the state, and the cows are always like happily lolling under those solar panels, and the energy's powering the farming operations. It's one big circular thing going on.
And Alan knows this better than I know, but cattle actually don't do well in heat. And in Arizona, dairy cattle have to have shade and sometimes some air movement because it'll really drop their milk production. So the shade is actually, you're losing opportunity of milk production if you don't cool them off. So cooling them off has another benefit. But you said something early on about the gas stoves. You said bans. You're not a fan of bans, and I think a lot of I learned. I didn't know how induction worked, so I learned that today. And we have a hot kitchen. We're a dude ranch, and we serve 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. I'm hoping our chefs aren't listening to this podcast today because I'm going to be hearing they need some induction. Lower that
It'll
kitchen.
Save you money, dude. You should get it. You should do it.
No, I know. I should. My point is, I think incentives and education trump bans every time. And I think that, I learned a lot just on that one topic. I'd heard that, I thought natural gas burned clean. I didn't know it had respiratory ramifications. So, what we ought to do is get our current administration to buy your book in physical or audio form and apply it to every family in this country. That would do more. That would do more than any ban or any, stirring up, making us more blue and red, because this is showing us the way forward. Your book is important.
I appreciate that. I think it's a message that I'd like to see spread for sure, and because it is a unifying message, it is a big tent. We can fix a lot of our problems and also improve our quality of life. One of the takeaways for me is a lot of the things that we can do that are beneficial for the planet carry all kinds of other benefits. It's awful, like with an induction, so it's not about giving up something we love. It's about upgrading to something we love even more if you just give it a chance, if you try it out. And I like that idea that we can upgrade our way into a better life and also into a more environmentally sound way of life.
As people would say, it's an elegant solution.
Yes, and there's a lot of room for innovation, as you found out, and also for community interaction. Switching to plastics, that is evident in one of your stories.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm glad we covered some of the sort of solutions to problems first, because people often say, "Oh, total garbage, huh? Is your book a real downer?" And I have to confess, well, the first thing you read is that you ate 285 pieces of plastic today. But no, it's not a downer.
Yeah, which you say is equivalent to a credit card. So we're ingesting a credit card's worth of plastic every week.
I like that analogy.
Yes.
I'm eating my visa.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's horrifying, isn't it? And plastic is now everywhere because we've been irresponsible in every imaginable way from the top down with how we dispose of this indestructible material. It's in our food, it's in our water, it's turning up in newborn babies' poop. I mean, think about that. A human being who's never actually had a meal outside of the womb has plastic in their system. It's everywhere, and we have people who doubt. Human being, they're sort of climate doubters say, how could a human activity affect something as vast as our entire planet? It's absurd, and yet we've gone from no plastics of any kind 100 years ago to having plastics everywhere in our environment, in our bodies, in our food, in less than a century of having plastics in our lives. And we have plasticized our environment. So yes, human activity can change the world, and not in a good way. And and we're going to have this problem to deal with for a long time. The best strategy we have open to us now is to stop using so much darn plastic, especially disposable plastics.
How are you going to go about that? How do we go about that and make people more aware?
Well, it's easy, actually, because none of it is necessary. The only reason why plastic products that are disposable exist is because it's profitable for the companies who use them. But there was no consumer demand for them. We had reuse systems when I grew up. You'd bring your Coke bottle or whatever back to the store, and it would be gathered up, it would be washed, it would be refilled, and you could use the same glass bottle 50 times that way, and then it would be ground up and made into new bottles, because glass is infinitely recyclable, unlike plastic. And
so why did that go away? Was it just cost factor? It was cheaper to throw it all in the trash and make it new?
The only reason it's cheaper is because this was a clever move by the packaging and beverage and fossil fuel industry, because in the original model, they were responsible for the fate of those containers. They had to take them back and then deal with them. And suddenly, it's pitched as convenience. Hey, everybody, this is so convenient. You don't have to bother to bring it back. It doesn't mean we didn't have to deal with it. So suddenly, the cost of disposal and recycling, all that material is on us, on taxpayers and consumers. It was a shell game. And if the big brands who make things like soda bottles and water bottles were actually responsible for the fate of their products, as they used to be, and also the damage that they do, these disposable products would be too costly to use.
And you talk about that. There's 4 states that have shifted that back, right? And that could be a potential solution. Is that fair?
It's the latest thing, and I hope Arizona has one in the works. Maine was the first. That's one of the reasons why I'm going up there next on my book tour. But many other states have followed. The official name is Extended Producer Responsibility, but what it really is, polluters pay. And the woman in Maine who really championed this idea for 8 years and got it passed, a single mom, an environmental activist, and just someone who was really getting scared by all the plastic waste. She said, I make my kids clean up the room when they mess it up, guys. Why are we cleaning up the plastics industry's mess for them? And those, that kind of sunk in is, wait, why are we subsidizing waste when we should be charging the waste makers for it? Let them pay for it. And that is game changing. And these laws are spreading now. It's
game changing through statute and through statewide recognition of this.
Yes, but I prefer to think of it as capitalism at work, because it's not regulation to say, hey, you're making a profit, but you should be paying your costs too, right? That's market economy. Instead of having a subsidy for a wasteful, harmful product. I mean, if I dump toxic waste on your lawn or your land, I could be held responsible for that. Well, they're dumping toxic waste into our bodies. And they didn't tell us about it. They claimed all this material was recyclable. You know how much plastic in America is actually recycled? 9%.
That's
All
not
those
much.
bottles and containers that say recyclable, well, theoretically they are. It just doesn't actually happen.
And we'll talk about what happened between 92 and 2018 with the export of recyclables.
Oh, well, that was...
Because you're talking about that.
Because our recycling is such a black hole. You put it in the bin and you don't really know what happens to it, right? There's no disclosure. There's no transparency. Well, it turned out for decades, what was happening is all the stuff we thought we were feeling virtuous about, that it was getting recycled, was actually being shipped to the ports and loaded on all those empty containers that had been shipped to us full from China, and they were buying up our trash, our plastic and paper waste. And it was not always handled in a responsible way. Much of it ended up as plastic pollution in the ocean, but some of it was made into products that would then be sold back to us, or packaging for them. And because China's was growing so rapidly, it happily paid top dollar for our trash that nobody else wanted to deal with. And so our recycling infrastructure just crumbled, because we were getting paid big bucks just to pack it up and ship our problems away. And finally, in 2018, China said, you know what? We've been warning you for years that this couldn't go on forever. We're done. We don't want your stuff anymore. We've got more than enough of our own. We've got our own consumer economy making trash now.
So was that a brought on by costs or just political pressure? That refusal?
It was neither. It was a way for companies like major waste collection companies to realize tremendous profits without actually doing anything, and to have on the ledger sheet, oh, this is recycled. Well, nobody knew if it was getting recycled or not. It was just disappearing into a giant cargo ship. And some of our greenest communities, our most progressive communities, like San Francisco and Portland, Oregon, and all these other places, were trying to get to zero waste to the landfill, recycle everything. And so, but what they were doing was shipping it all away and getting paid large amounts of money for it by the ton. That all that went away, and the true cost of trying to recycle this mess has become clear, and our recycling system collapsed. You probably remember in 2018, 2019, and then the pandemic made things worse. A lot of communities just stopped recycling completely, and it's only just now starting to come back, but it's not anywhere near what it should be.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So it's just piling up?
Well, yeah, or it's going to the landfill. Some of it's getting recycled again. In states where these new laws are coming online, now there's an incentive for one of two things to happen: making materials for your containers that actually can be recycled, because if they can't be, they have to pay through the nose, the manufacturers do, or to shift to reusable container systems again, which suddenly we're going to start looking much more attractive. And that's really what the architects of this legislation are hoping to encourage. So it's both a disincentive to pollute, but an incentive to have a more sustainable solution.
So is this gaining speed? Is this getting more?
Well, the first law passed 2 years ago, so the rules are just starting to come online. Nothing moves fast. And next year we'll start to see some action on these laws taking effect. So it's pretty exciting time.
I think when people find out they're eating a credit card a week, is it a week? They're gonna hear a little more about reusable.
Well, and there's all kinds of potential medical effects. And I got to tell you, if we don't slow down our plastic pollution, it's going to be 2 credit cards in just a few years. So.
Well, I'll tell you, it's out there. I mean, again, I'm not somebody who's particularly engaged in this topic, and it's out there. You're reading the plastics, this statistic or that. They're out there, so we're hearing
Don't store your food in plastic. Don't cook in plastic. Don't microwave in plastic. Whatever you do, it releases all kinds of toxins into your food. Use, the Zero Waste Chef I write about in the book, Anne-Marie Bonneau. She also has her own book called The Zero Waste Chef, but she shared some tips. She says, I wash my peanut butter jars, my mayonnaise jars, my jelly jars, whatever it is, glass, and I just keep them and I use them. That's my food storage system. And if I have a salad left over in a bowl, I cover it with a plate. I don't need saran wrap. It works just fine. Don't use plastic, and then stop using plastic some more and avoid it some more, because that's the only way around this. Don't drink water out of a bottle. You're imbibing 100 times more plastic out of a plastic water bottle than a person who doesn't drink that way.
I avoid. I didn't know that. I didn't know most of what we talked about today. I feel like that's
scary, but
today.
It's fixable. We don't need that stuff. We have great alternatives. Aluminum cans.
I get
bottles.
it. I'm old enough. I'm still marveling at the plastic water bottle business. But we're running out of time. Let's plug that Zero Waste Chef book before we talk about yours. Give us that again.
Oh, yes, Anne-Marie Bonneau. So the Zero Waste Chef. She has a blog and a book by that title, and she was kind enough to be one of the characters in my book and to share some of her tips about how to cut waste in your cooking and how you handle your food. And and she's great.
Well, and then we're going to obviously, the government's probably not going to buy your book and put it in every home. I don't know why not.
You write them a letter, Russell.
I wish I had the red phone number, but I don't. So everybody who's listening today should buy Total Garbage: How We Can Fix Our Waste and Heal Our World, and by Edward Humes. And it's not just we hear a lot of bad stuff every day, and it's what the news likes to give us. And this is showing us a way forward. And we heard some of it today, lots more in the book. Where else? You've written a lot of books, including winning a Pulitzer. Where do people learn about you? They just Google, do a web search of Edward Humes?
I have a website, edwardhumes.com. That's pretty easy. And there's tons of information. The book has things that anyone can do to be less wasteful, and also, avoid things that are making them unhealthy, throughout the book, and in a master list. And I'm putting that, and also some discussion guides and other things are available right on my website, and that information is free. And then
there's a lot of information there.
Like the book.
Yeah, and Humes is Humes, Edward Humes.
.com.
That is correct.
And Total Garbage is the book, and it's anything but that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Alan and Ed. You do challenge us with stories about maybe our way of life and how we do our world and work today. And a number of you have some messages and some stories and some business services that can help people live better lives right now. You're in the business of doing good things for good people so they can have a better life. And this is a perfect place to tell your story. We're looking for people right now who not only want to have a shout out, a promotion, but they would like the privilege and the opportunity to sponsor their program, their work, their services on Cowboy Up Podcast or some of the other fine radio programs that are coming out in the Western tradition. That's what we do at Cowboy Spirit Radio. And we'd love to talk to you about perhaps getting your business, your service promoted by people who care and pay attention because they listen to Cowboy Radio. So reach out to me. Again, stan@witradio.net, stan@witradio.net. And we'll talk about getting you and your business, your good cause, your message right here on the radio.
Alan, I love doing the podcast, and I always learn something. I don't think I've ever walked away from one that I didn't, but this is so timely, and it's so, I'm guessing Edward and I don't agree on everything, and in the big picture we may have some significant differences, but fixing waste could transform the world, and certainly our part of the world where we live a life of needless excess, and a lot of it is just straight up laziness.
You lay it on laziness. I was just going to say, what's the behind that drives that ship?
I think two answers: bad habits. We're creatures of habits, humans.
Absolutely.
Bad habits that we kind of have
inherit
thrust on. I think at some level been thrust on us, and just straight up laziness. A real quick story that always sticks with me: when we were kids here at the ranch, laundry for a while would come in bags, and it would be tied up with a bit of string, and the bags were reusable, and our chef's mother would take the string and tie it into, and then roll it up into a ball, so we had a ball of free string, because she had lived in the Depression. I think we need to go back to some of that lifestyle.
Good story.
Thanks for joining us today. Hats off to Stan Husted's production team. Let us know if you're doing anything innovative to fix our waste and heal our world. We'll help spread the word. Next week, talk turns to cowboy and dude ranching storytelling about the West. Until then, I'm Lynn Weezy Sneed, reminding you to sit tall, ride safe, and enjoy this Western tune by singer-songwriter David Rickner called 6 White Stallions.
Your life seems simple, your needs so few. Just some grass, water will do. Yet your beauty always shines through. Wish that I could be just like you. 6 wild stallions running free, the band of brothers that inspire me. Be all I was born to be, living simply, wild and free. You neither toil nor do you spin, simply arrayed from a beauty within. Your hooves not known to a farrier's hand, yet perfectly shaped by the rocks of the land. 6 wild stallions running free, the band of brothers who inspire me to be all I was born to be, living simply, wild and free. Your sleek dark bodies gleam in the sun, such grace and beauty whenever you run. Yet none of this wrought by the human hand, just nourished by the grass of the land. May you be free till your days are done. May you run off in the setting sun to those heavens where you'll always be, unbridled, unfettered, wild and free. 6 wild stallions running free, the band of brothers who inspire me to be all I was born to be, living simply, wild and free. Living simply, wild and free.